Rather, we communicate with the internet, something that I don't think was exactly possible before. And I think we'll see a lot more of that now. And so what does social look like in a world where the internet itself is something you can communicate with rather than through?
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Something New, the podcast where we talk about interesting things going on in tech for people building something new. Or at least people aspiring to build something new. I'm Lior.
And I'm Steph.
Think of us as a bit of a technical how I built this, but maybe a little bit less Guy Raz and a little bit more Guy Riz.
This is the peak, and then we're going downhill from here.
I'm using my podcast voice.
We're going to try a new thing where each of us brings something that we saw that was interesting this week and surprises the other with it. And I'm curious to see how it goes.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, this is not exactly a surprise. I texted you as soon as I found out about what I was excited about, but for purposes of this conversation, I think it's still really interesting. So actually, it came across my plate because we posted the Alex and Hallow episode last week, which did really well on Twitter. I got a bunch of new followers from it. Thank you, Alex. But one
God's work.
I mean, the most important thing that he's been doing, obviously. But I noticed someone had followed me with like a very funny profile photo, and I randomly clicked on it, and the guy's name was Arfur Rock, like Arfur Arfur Rock, and the guy has 400 followers. He's not big yet, but I'm like scrolling down his page. I actually didn't even have anyone that I knew that was following him, but he literally just has all of these tweets, basically outing companies and their funding rounds way before they were actually announced, and also sharing very public numbers. So you click on his page, his description's literally a non-GP at multi-stage VC, live tweeting my IC deal flow. And at first it's like, okay, this is definitely like a troll account, whatever. Then you scroll down and it's actually real companies that have announced their rounds recently with real ARR numbers.
Or some of them haven't announced, but will announce, because I know some of them.
Yeah, it's crazy. So like even this morning, looking at it right now, he talks about Monarch Money. It's a personal finance platform. They're at 25 million ARR, 10 times year over year growth. Talking about the Series B. Scroll down, there's more. He talked about the Decagon Series B before that was announced. He shares like term sheet terms, the lead, valuation they're at. And this guy has basically no engagement. It's so funny. These tweets literally have like one a lot of them have zero. It's wild. And I'm like, who is this person? How is this account not blown up? It definitely will blow up at some point, but I'm just so curious if and when it does. How is no one following?
I mean, there
this?
as of recording, there's like 432 followers. Like, I think maybe one goal for next episode is to have it blow up, I guess. But I mean, it's pretty incredible because I being familiar with some of these companies, like the information is at the very least directionally accurate. And sometimes specifically accurate, and it seems like many times specifically accurate. And it's our new genuine info. Like I remember during I think COVID times, genuine info was another one of these accounts that was like predicting things and also like having some of this information come through. And it was like every kind of VC knew of these things. And I think this one will become the next version of this because genuine info stopped tweeting as much, and here we're gonna have another one.
Genuine info. Wait, are they still? Is the account still up? I've never even heard of that.
No, I mean, it's still up, but it's not active anymore. And so this was like the predecessor. So when I texted Arfur to a couple of friends, they were like, "Oh my God, is this the new genuine info?" And so that was the.
I wonder. Huh. Interesting. Yeah, you're right. They stopped tweeting. Arfur Rock also follows genuine info, so maybe it's just carrying on the legacy.
Or maybe it's getting one. By the way, just as a quick history lesson for everybody, Arfur Rock is named after Arthur Rock, who's like one of the OG VCs, like first investor in some pretty interesting companies like Intel, Apple, Xerox, the NASDAQ stock market. It's some pretty run-of-the-mill companies. And so anyways, I think the name definitely takes its background from Arthur.
Yeah. It's amusing to me too. He's not hiding, or he's obviously not hiding, he's tweeting publicly, but he's like directly tagging the companies. He's directly tagging the founders and the VCs that he's outing. And I guess they all ignore him, which maybe is the best course of action because that's why the account has stayed as small as it has. But I wonder if anyone's like freaking out about this, just because.
I
I
mean,
mean, I
I'm
feel
freaking
like
out about it because, like, I feel like you discovered like the next,
yeah,
not to be too hyperbolic, but I think you discovered the next like Jay-Z or Sabrina Carpenter of VC, a very
of-
niche VC tweeting.
I mean, I'm excited about it. It's so interesting though. I feel like there's already paranoia amongst founders who don't want to share their info or are paranoid during fundraising processes because they know their info usually gets back to their competitors and things. And now it's not just their competitors; it's literally for the whole world to see. So who knows how this will turn out? I don't know if there's anything enforceable that people can do. So maybe it'll just be a thing that keeps going, and
Totally.
there'll be no secrets anymore. Yeah,
Yeah, I think at the like on that point, it's funny because like at the very beginning, I actually think it can make sense to be more paranoid and not share things. And some founders, even at the later stages, are very good at keeping things pretty tight-lipped. But at a certain point, like everyone knows all the numbers. Like
yeah,
it's all in data rooms across the land, and everyone knows all these numbers. And so you can only like kind of shelter things so long, especially when it's like a Series C, Series D company. Like there's no way that
totally.
it's like one text away for anyone to find out numbers.
Totally. I also think it's funny. This guy has to be at one of the big multi-stage firms, just given the visibility that they have, which makes this whole thing funnier. Like imagining someone at like, Sequoia, like a GP, like in the middle of their IC meeting, like doing this like secret tweeting. I don't know. There's something very amusing about that. This is probably like an older guy. Why is he doing this? I have no idea, but that just makes me very happy. And I
Yeah,
just
I was
hope
trying to
to see
think
how
like
this evolves.
yeah. I mean, I've never had a burner account, which is exactly what someone who doesn't have a burner account would say, or who
Yeah,
has a burner
exactly.
account would say rather. But so I'm definitely adding myself. But no, but I've thought about it before. Not like seriousness, but even talked to a couple friends about like should we have a shared burner account, and we always decided against it. So I always had wondered about like someone's like incentives for doing this, but maybe they either like have like fuck you money or they just like creating chaos because that's clearly what this thing will be soon, I think.
Totally. Well, what's funny? It reminds me of that story. I don't remember which rapper it was. It was like 50 Cent. Somebody they created like a fan account, either a fan account for themselves or some kind of like secret account, um, like outing a bunch of other people and boosting, his music, whatever. And then it came out like years later that it was actually like the rapper themselves. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I mean, I know Kevin Durant did this in basketball. Like he got caught
Oh,
like
really?
saying something specifically about like Kevin Durant, and everyone like he thought he was on his burner account, and he wasn't. He was on his normal account, and so he like was tweeting as if he was on the burner account. It was like, dude,
Oh
it's
my
you.
God.
So he got
Yeah.
caught red-handed, which was freaking incredible.
I feel like something like that is going to happen here. It's like a deal, like for example, there's going to be a hot deal. They're going to not want to share the info. Um, because it would actually hurt their ability to get the deal or secure it or whatever. And then people are going to start slowly putting together clues to figure out, okay, it has to be this firm because this is the only firm that has a reason to hide this information for this specific company. And then I don't know. I'm curious to see how this will evolve. I think this person will be unmasked at some point if they continue
Uh,
tweeting, and I'm
I'm sure it
excited
feels
to
like that's
see
what
it.
happened with genuine info, or at the very least, like that person decided like the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. Yeah, because like the thing I would be worried about is like you'd like start people could like now with like AI if you tweet long enough tweets, people are
Mm,
able to. I think one person got caught like this as well, where they could kind of tell that they had like a similar tone
mm,
to like another person who was like the real account. And so I guess if you're just posting information, then it's probably a little bit harder. But there could be like some serious like hey, you're releasing like non-public information, like not like a legal perspective, but at least from like a reputational perspective.
oh, totally. Yeah. Anyway, so that's my gem of the five this week. I think this guy's gonna blow up soon. But
Love that.
anyway, how about you? What's on your end?
Okay. Yeah. The other big news of the week is that Stripe acquired stablecoin platform Bridge for a little over $1 billion. It's Stripe's largest acquisition ever
Crazy.
and the most valuable deal in crypto so far. Actually, there's a crazy statistic. Like,
Oh,
actually, like I mean, because there's only so many buyers in crypto. Like, there was a time when Binance was a buyer, but like if you think about it, really just generally, at least historically, Coinbase has been really the only like big acquisition, type company. Because like this fifth or sixth biggest crypto acquisition is like $90 million, which is great for the founders, but not like considered big in kind of the VC scope of the world. But yeah, Bridge, yeah, stablecoin platform. They actually raised their Series A, interestingly, earlier this year at like something around like $100 million. Sequoia led the Series A, so that's like about a 10x in like 11 months, which from Sequoia's perspective, I'm sure they're shooting for $1 billion plus returns on given exits, but that's probably like $100 million in 11 months. So
Wow.
at least of kind of gains, and so not too bad. Like even like Mudang Coin would be happy with that probably. So I mean that begs the question, like, Steph, do you think crypto's back?
Oh man. Well, actually, I'm still just hung up on what you said about this being the biggest crypto acquisition, which I didn't realize
Yeah,
because granted, $1 billion is an exceptional outcome,
yeah,
but it's so
yeah,
funny just given the immense amount of wealth creation that's been created in crypto over the last
yeah,
decade plus. That feels shocking, actually. So that's so interesting. Is
yeah.
crypto
Because
back? I don't
all the big things are tokens. Like either like historically you've either been the token or you've been like a small
Yeah.
acquisition, and so this is kind of the first one that's kind of not one. It's not. It's one of the few ones that's in between.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I mean, I've been thinking about this lately too, also in just relation to like poly market and prediction markets, which I know another use case that
Oh
people
yeah,
talk about a
yeah,
lot in regards to crypto. I will say, in my experience, I feel like VC's pattern recognition certainly is ignited by announcements of large exits in a space, which is very ironic because that's like that's a what's it called, lagging indicator almost. Like
yeah.
by the time something
Totally.
has reached a lot of success, it's like,
It's
well,
so
that
real
signals you should have
though.
invested 10 years ago. You know what I mean?
Like there's gonna be a lot.
So,
Like it's crazy. It's so
yeah.
stupid. And like this is like classic like VC school of fish type situation where people are just like following the trends. But I've had some people who've been looking into crypto over the past couple of years, and they were like on islands ostensibly. Like all these crypto funds pivot into AI. Like it happened many times over, and so a lot of activity will probably be happening now. But it's only the people who like positioned themselves in the past couple of years to be ready for like when there's maybe another kind of bull wave or whatnot. Are actually going to be the ones that are making money, because like everyone who comes in after these kinds of things usually like is screwed,
Mm,
like maybe with
right.
some exceptions. And so it's just so interesting. You're totally right. I think this will happen in this case as well.
The other thing I thought was interesting this week, and actually can segue well into our guest this week, Michael Sayman. He is the founder of Social AI, but he's like a social media savant. That's barely exaggerating.
Totally. Yeah.
He was recruited to work at Facebook Meta, and actually just announced he's returning to Meta, which is very ironic. But he started there as an intern when he was a literal teenager. Mark Zuckerberg discovered him because of a viral app that he had launched. Was recruited as an intern to work there, and then has had a very kind of long and successful career in social, ranging from Roblox to Twitter to there's another company that I'm missing in there. But yeah, I don't know. This conversation was so interesting, especially as like a former consumer VC. I loved talking to him and thought,
Totally.
his thoughts on everything were just so interesting. Any like takeaways that you had from that combo?
I mean, when you talk to some of these, like, to use the terms of the kids, S tier, like,
Oh
crypto,
wait,
or
what does
sorry,
that mean?
S tier,
Uh,
basically like top,
what that
top
means.
tier, top tier.
Okay, got it,
Like,
got it, got
when
it.
you talk to these S tier consumer founders, you just learn something new every single time. And it's almost like the way
Mm,
the brain works, like as it relates to consumer and consumer social, is just different. um,
yeah,
and he's ostensibly created like a new paradigm. Like you're it's like a social network, but it's like you're only interacting with AIs. And I'm sure there'll be other people copying it soon, and there already kind of are. But he's this person. He's like he's someone who kind of thinks and lives in the future. And when you talk to like someone like that about social, you just realize how much you don't know, especially on my end, who if someone who like is a voyeur in the space. And so it was an amazing conversation, and really enjoyed him.
yeah, totally. I realized I should have introduced this company, Social AI, which kind of to your point is basically Twitter, but with bots only, and you can kind of choose like the voices, whether contrarian or friendly, agreeable people, or a bunch of other traits that you choose, kind of customize your social experience. Whenever you tweet something out, you'll get responses kind of from these bots that you've kind of predetermined the mood and sentiment of. But I was also going to say too, it's so interesting to see the news about Ray-Ban Meta glasses doing so well. We have a whole conversation in our interview about, which actually is ironic because he went back to Meta, but he was saying how he thinks Meta is much more fragile than most people think, in part because they don't have hardware locked in. But anyway, maybe the Meta Ray-Bans will change that. I'm certainly a super user. I literally have them even here right now.
Yeah, totally.
I even had 2 pairs as of last week. So anyway, I think it's very cool. And this is one of my favorite interviews, I think. So I'm excited to share it. Michael, thank you so much for joining us. We're super excited to have you.
Of course. Glad to be here.
Yeah. Well, maybe just to kickstart, you've had a very long career in tech despite being so young. I was telling Leora, I feel like doing the research for this, normally people have like, an article or two, and you guys, needless to say, you had like a plethora to choose from. So in your own words, maybe I'd love to hear kind of a brief intro on how you got to today. Building apps.
Yeah. I started building apps as a kid. I was like 12. I loved coding, but more than anything, I loved playing online virtual world games like Club Penguin, and I was just so excited by that stuff that I ended up trying to learn how to build apps that were in similar nature to those, or reference sites to those popular games. And as soon as I started to see the potential in the space and how much fun it was to work on this stuff, I just decided to dedicate the rest of my life to learning how to do even more cool things with it. And so I spent, a few years in high school trying to build out my own games. And I think that's when Zuckerberg found out about a couple of the things I was working on, and then reached out asking if I'd like to meet. And at that point, my mom was like nervous. She said, "You're going with me." So I ended up meeting Zuckerberg for the first time. It was my first meeting was with my mom sitting right next to me.
Did she know who Mark Zuckerberg was? And the reason why I asked is
first, but she looked him up, and I remember like my mom like all of a sudden being very, very concerned about me going by myself. That was more so her just trying to get in, in that meeting, but. I was so embarrassed. But it was interesting. Like I'm so grateful for the early years that I got to spend over at Meta at Facebook, because it taught me so much. I got to not only understand like what the tech space is like today, but also what it's like to work at one of these larger tech companies. How they view the space, what the competition looks like, and just what really is possible in terms of building these apps. And so I spent about 4 years there. I went to Google, then I went to Roblox, then I tried Twitter, then I built my company, and I jumped around a bunch. But I look at my career as just one of me trying out new ideas, regardless of where I'm at, and trying to see what resonates with people and where the market's going and how I can have fun building in that space.
I'd love to hear more about the specifics. Like, what are some of the early apps that you built? I know I saw 4Snaps. I'm curious about the app that Zuckerberg discovered you on, or there are multiple.
Yeah. So I had built this app 4Snaps as a kid, mostly because I looked at the top charts and I saw Snapchat and I saw Draw Something, which was like a charades game where you would draw things. Yeah. And I just thought
love that game.
It was so much fun. So and Depop, it's funny because that company used to have like an online website, and nobody really used Draw Something there. But when they ported it to the mobile phone, that was like when it really took off for them. And then they were acquired by Zynga. But during that time, I just remember seeing that in the top charts, seeing Snapchat up there. The iPhone 4 had just come out, the selfie camera for the first time on the phone. And I'd argue it's probably the most important feature on the phone right now, and probably the biggest reason why, ironically, I think the Meta AR glasses are going to take a little longer to get adopted because of that, right? But and that's probably the reason why we don't have full screen, like full front displays on our phones, is because we have to have that cutout for the selfie camera, and nobody wants to, sacrifice that quality. But anyway, yeah, that was essentially what I did. It was I looked at the top charts, I saw Snapchat, I saw Trust something, and I thought like, can I put them together? Like, can I mix them together, and what does that look like? And so I basically just made a photo/video based charades game where you would pick a word and then you'd have to take photos related to that word, send them to your friend, and see if they can guess what it was. And it was just a simple turn-based game. I wasn't trying to like invent a new form of retention or try to do anything like that. I figured that I didn't have the skills of the team necessary to do a bunch more than that. But given that was the space at the time, I kind of went for it. And that's what Zuckerberg found was my success in that. I had built it with a backend service called Parse, which was like Firebase, but before Firebase. And Facebook had just acquired Parse, and they saw a highlight of my app in their service being used. And then Zuckerberg like saw me at like this all hands meeting from Meta because they like did a video of me explaining my app. Or actually, I sent them a video, but I didn't know that they were going to play it. And I was in my pajamas, and it was very embarrassing. But like basically,
Incredible.
the whole company at Facebook saw me in my pajamas in high school explaining what 4Snaps was. And I think at that point, from what I understand, Zuckerberg like reached over to somebody else and was like, "Let's hire this kid." And then the person that he was talking to forgot about it, obviously, because that's how people are. But there was a recruiter nearby that overheard him say that to the other person. And then that recruiter reached back out and said, "Hey, do you guys have like Michael's email or something? Like Mark said he wanted to hire him. You all forgot, but like, come on." And then that's when I got the email. I was in math class and I was like, all right, okay. And so, yeah, that's kind of how it started. In terms of some of the other apps, my theme around the apps that I'd always built has always been to like, kind of like try to understand a little bit of a metaphorical to like the world that we're in. So I built a game called The Waiting Game that was basically just like Farmville, except it didn't have the farm or the storyline. It was just like buttons that you tap, and then the button tells you when to come back to tap it again. And different buttons of different colors just tell you like when to come back to tap it, and you get notifications when your button is ready to be tapped. Like it's just like this feeling that like, and it's just called The Waiting Game because that's pretty much what it is. And like,
It's incredible.
Anyway, I had a lot of fun with it. The leaderboard showed like who waited the longest. You could pay money to like, not wait as much. And it's funny. A couple of reporters who like tried it out ended up spending money on the game, and I just thought it was such an interesting, I think, like observation about how some of these mobile games are how they work.
So
funny. I feel like you need to do a collaboration with Mr. Beast or something. Like I feel like there's something here, some kind of like psychological game show. People are waiting.
We're gonna like
something.
put you in a coffin like 10 feet underground. You're gonna wait 24 hours and press this button or something.
I think some. I don't know if I remember this correctly, but somebody was making a game where like you like have to press a button and you can't lift your finger for I don't know how long, and whoever holds that button down the longest wins like a prize for Mr. Beast or something like that. I was like, okay, well, that's maybe, I don't know if that's the healthiest game, but like, whatever,
So interesting.
Right.
I have to ask, how did your meetings with Zuckerberg go? Like, I can't even, what did he say? What did you say? Was there any,
a lot of like my time at Meta involved me just trying to like build out whatever I could regarding the Snapchat / like Instagram space, because the competition there was really tough at the time, and the company was really focused on trying to solve some of those big issues around like whether or not we were to implement some ephemeral content sharing or not, whether we wanted to open one of the apps to the camera or not. There were a lot of questions around like how should the interface look like at a time when people were using Instagram less and less. And I kind of walked into the company kind of with a giant like alarm bell trying to tell everybody that Snapchat was taking over everything. And, like, was I a little alarmist about it? Probably. But like, it served
for good reason, probably.
I think it served as a good motivation for some people when I'd walk in and I'd do these like, these almost like seminars within the company for like the designers, the PMs. And I did start the conversation by just showing like the activity of my friends on Instagram being like one post every 2 weeks compared to like a few years prior where it was like every other day. But it was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun doing it. And in terms of the meetings with Zuckerberg, like most of those meetings involved like figuring out what we were going to try to experiment on and what we were going to try to build. What did those interfaces look like? At times it was conversations around what the latest creators were like, or what was morphing in terms of the celebrity space and what those creators looked like and what the creators were doing and what Vine was and how that worked. Or I remember trying to, work with Zuckerberg on like understanding how Snapchat worked. So I'd send him a snap, he'd send me a snap, but like the snap was maybe a little not like how my friends would send it. So I'd be like, hey, like maybe that's not quite how it's used. And fundamentally, I thought it was really cool because, like that was a lot of fun. And so that was early on. Then later on, it was a lot of conversations around, okay, we're going to build out stories. What should we prioritize, right? Like, should we be building Instagram stories first, or should it be WhatsApp stories, which ended up being called status? Or should it be the Messenger stories or Facebook stories? And at the time, Messenger and Facebook were separate in terms of like the stories implementation that they had. And we ultimately decided, like, while we wanted to go for everything, Instagram stories would be the higher leverage one. And we all kind of believed WhatsApp was also pretty strong, but it ended up being, weirdly enough, Instagram stories kind of took off without a hesitation while the rest of the products didn't. And I think the timing was quite right for Instagram on that. The demographics, the position in the market compared to something like WhatsApp, where it was more positioned as a messaging app. So anyway, those conversations were interesting and fun. And sometimes I don't even feel like it's real that my life has included things like that. Where conversations like that at like 3 a.m. with like some of these execs is like weird, but it was so cool. I'm grateful for it.
Is there anything you learned about like product and experimentation that you've like kept as you've kind of like curious to learn what those things would be?
We know a lot less than people think. I think the biggest lesson for me was like Meta and Facebook, they know a lot less than people think they do. And they're a lot more vulnerable as a company than people think they are. The platform it's like a house of cards. Like if they don't build a product that people find interesting, in 3 days they're out, and there's no hardware that ties them to Facebook or Instagram or anything, versus a platform like Apple or Google, where you really do have like some walled garden benefits that prevent users from, expressing their disapproval of the product's experience. So in that sense, like it is a lot more difficult for them. And I think that's one thing I learned is like, if you don't have hardware, like you really have to compete with the entire world of software to win. And there is there's no significant moat, right? The social graph maybe a little bit, but every day that becomes less relevant in that space. And that's one thing I learned. I think another, just in terms of product iteration, is that like it's something I think I learned through my own experience there, where you don't need to be right with the product at first. You just need to be willing to experiment. And like a lot of times, I think early on, I wanted to study the space as much as I could to try and get the most correct answer about what the product needed to be, only to realize over the years that the things that worked best were the things that were experimented on most frequently and most iteratively. And it's because that iteration process leads to the correct answer, regardless of whether or not somebody had that idea in mind before or not. And that, for me, it kind of sucked because I was like, damn, like, I wish I could come up with this idea, or I wish I could have come up with that idea. But in reality, like the real satisfaction comes from the impact you can have. So, being able to get to that, I think, is more important. And having learned that through those years was quite a worldview shift for me.
I'm gonna give you credit. I remember this very distinctly, the like Snapchat versus Meta, Instagram, Facebook story wars, because I had just joined a VC firm at the time. And I remember I posted a few Instagram stories. My bosses were all friends with me on Instagram from like day one. That was a mistake. But aside from that, I remember I got chastised for posting Instagram stories because we were investors in Snapchat. And I thought they were kidding, but they were not kidding. And they literally made me stop posting on Instagram stories until we divested from our Snapchat investment, which took like a year plus. Like I was
I always wondered why your
Snapchat.
Instagram lagged behind your Twitter. Now we know why.
Now we know why. So anyway, you did your job well.
You know, and there were a bunch of decisions that the whole team made that were, you know, decisions I wouldn't have made, but had they not made them, the product wouldn't have succeeded. So like, there's a lot of things that I think I contributed, but there's certainly a lot of things that, like, you know, had I been the one in charge in that decision, or had I been the one, you know, that they ended up listening to, it might not have gone the way that it did. I remember there were debates around the design of the product. There was like one of the product managers set up a meeting with me, try and figure out, you know, what the design should be, opened up a little notebook. We were at, you know, one of the cafeterias and showed me a sketch drawing of like the Instagram homepage and said, hey, what if we like put the stories instead of in a list, like, you know, how Snapchat has it, what if we like made like this like row of circles of the profile pictures, and we use like this ring around the profile picture to like indicate the story, and they tap on it and then that's a story. And my first question was like, well, how do they know the difference between tapping on that to lead to the profile versus tapping on that to like go to the story? And they're like, oh, well, we'll figure it out. And I was like, I don't know. I was like, well, I don't think it's a good idea. Maybe we should just stick to the list. And I'm glad we didn't. Because, oh my gosh, that the ring, and Snapchat ended up copying the rings, which is crazy. Like the whole concept of that was it's quite interesting to see those discussions play out over time, and then realizing like, wow, I knew nothing. You know, like,
wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm so curious. You mentioned, which I think is super insightful and not talked about enough, just kind of how vulnerable, I mean, social networks in general, but particularly we're talking about Meta not having hardware is. I'm curious how that played into your decision to start Friendly Apps, or if that was a factor at all. Like, I think, you know, most VCs right now would say that, you know, consumer social is dead and that it's a really competitive space, all this stuff. But, you know, you would know how difficult it is, and you still took the leap anyway. So I'm really curious about that.
You know, I think that there is opportunity in consumer social, but not in the way that it was before. I think we're in a different era. I decided to kind of build out Friendly Apps. I always wanted to try this for a long time. I had a couple of ideas for years that I wanted to explore, but the timing was never quite right. And for me, the biggest thing with Friendly Apps was like, is there a way for us to build social-like products that help people with the things that they are facing in their day-to-day life, rather than maybe distract them from it? Like, right. Is there a nicotine patch to like the cigarette kind of deal, right? Mm-hmm. And I always thought like there has to be a way to do it, but for the longest time, I felt like we just didn't have the technology to make that possible. Once AI kind of came around, at that point, once I saw ChatGPT, I thought, okay, maybe this is the tech that we were missing in order to make it possible. And so I started experimenting with ways that we can integrate AI with social and what that would look like. And frankly, it's a different space, right? Like, it is not, you know, me interacting with my friends, posting a photo and just being us online. It really is a big shift. It's more of a world where we no longer communicate through the internet, but rather we communicate with the internet. Something that I don't think was exactly possible before. And I think we'll see a lot more of that now. And so what does social look like in a world where the internet itself is something you can communicate with rather than through? I think is a expansion of the term social. And so I built out social AI within Friendly Apps with the goal of maybe expanding on what social means to not just include interacting with other people, but rather interacting with the internet as well? Can there be a way to socially engage with all of the data that's collected on the internet? I think so. And I think that's probably the future. And so I think it depends on how you define social as to whether or not consumer social is dead.
Fair enough. I think that's so interesting. Like I saw one of the articles written about social AI, and you brought up the example of like Reddit's "Am I the Asshole?" And I thought, like, I was literally thinking that as I was reading the article, and when I saw you say that, I was like, it really does resonate. I mean, does it really make a difference if I post on Reddit and I get a bunch of responses? Like, these are all anonymous people to me anyway that I know nothing about, versus posting on social AI and getting a plethora of very various opinions driven by internet data, to your point. I thought that was super interesting and was kind of curious about the other use cases or other questions that might come about with more usage.
Oh, yeah. So people have been using it for that. People have been using it for search. Like, they've been asking, like, who should I vote for? Which I thought was kind of interesting. Like, and then they'll like click through the threads, right? Because replies get replies and they're all AIs replying to each other. So like you could like dive into like a debate between two AIs and then just keep going as far as you want and bring in another one and just see the whole, like, it's quite interesting in terms of an interface. And so I think while, maybe the current implementation of social AI is not the final form that this will take, and I certainly don't think it is, the foundation for what I think underneath that can do for the world, I think is huge. I think the ability to map out the responses a language model could possibly give to a user around any question in a structure similar to a social network, where you can dig into all the perspectives, see the conversations between them, I think just opens the door for a lot of value that these AI models can give that they currently don't offer. When somebody asks an AI model like questions that don't have a singular correct answer, like what should I eat for dinner, or like should I move to San Francisco or not, like these questions, the AI can't give you a right answer. And so what a lot of these companies have done with their language models is that they've actually kind of like squeezed them down to like giving one final output that is the most correct. But when you have a question that doesn't have one correct answer, what you end up doing is almost averaging out all of the possible answers into a singular, bland nothingness of an answer that kind of gives you a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and maybe kind of tries overly to like fit to your question, to the point where you start to realize if you ask a question in a slightly different way, it'll just give you that answer. And so it feels like an echo chamber. Whatever you say to it, it kind of agrees with you back, and there's no way to distill what the right answer is or what it should be. And so it feels broken. I would say it feels incomplete. It offers some interesting use cases, but for the use case of understanding information or trying to get down to what an answer is for anything, it certainly lacks on that front. And I think people can feel that. And so they go back to Google anyway. And you ask yourself, well, like, what is missing? And I think fundamentally it's different perspectives. I think we're not using the models in the way that they are built to be used. The technology is not meant to give you one answer. It's a fuzzy graph of information that's tied to probabilities based on what words and what phrases and what prompts are used. And I think there's an interesting mechanic there that if we learn from social networks reinforcements around how they rank their algorithms to give you the content that might be interesting, you can build all sorts of utilities for people that give them news feeds with information that are helpful to them, give them, all sorts of resources that like modify prompts based on the interaction that the user has with the content. And I don't know, there's a cool cycle in there that I think is waiting to be built out. I don't know if I'll do it myself or with a whole team of people, but like it's coming. And I'm excited. I'm glad because it's finally, like we've been stuck on these social networks where we don't know if it's a human, if it's a bot, and what the hell am I using, and why am I getting this news, and is this news what's really happening, or is it just making me angry? Like, these are questions we all feel right now, and I think that's coming to an end. So it kind of makes me feel good.
Yeah, I mean, on the front of like some product decisions and choices, with social AI, you could imagine a world in which the product is more geared towards like friendliness, or you have like anons, as opposed to having like people with like little personalities, and those personalities like have different levels of hostility and different levels of like agreeableness. And so maybe it would be interesting to hear like how you think about the best possible version of a social network, and like how you think about like tweaking those traits, or like how you think about making product decisions as it relates to fostering the right kind of conversation between a human and the internet, to use
the way I see it is it's not so much whether or not we integrate like the human aspect to it or not. Do we put the little profile pictures or not? Personally, I wanted to get rid of them. Like, the next update I was going to do was just replace the faces of people with like what I was calling like a color, like an abstract color-based like fingerprint for a profile photo, where as you talk to it and it modifies the persona's prompts, it like slightly tweaks it so that they're all AI. Like, if you ask on social AI, are you human or not? They all say they're AI. So it's not like they're trying to pretend they're human. I don't think that they necessarily have to. And so I'm trying to strip some of these elements out. What I will say is like more important than like the design itself, I think is actually the interface being used to reinforce a like flywheel of improvement on the responses in terms of relevance to the user. So like right now, social media uses all the data around your posts, your likes, your replies to find information on the web or posts from other people to then feed to you in the algorithm, right? Then also, not only does the algorithm find this content to feed you in the newsfeed, the algorithms then also figure out the sentiment around your post, its relationship to the people that follow you and other people on the network, and then tries to find places to display your content for others. So then you end up getting replies and reactions to your content that are relevant or useful to you. So that combination of an algorithm's already figured out. Now that we have these AI models that can generate content and map out, like literally are mapping out the entirety of how these words all relate to each other, what you can do is use that like reinforcement flywheel that these algorithms use to find content. And instead of having to rely on just finding the content out there to plug into the network, you can actually just generate that content via the prompts that can then be modified with every interaction that a user has with the content. And so what you really end up with is like a way better way to like make ChatGPT like feel useful to a user. Because the way that you customize ChatGPT today is that you have to go into the settings and put like information about yourself and like how you want it to talk. And like, that's just not going to be the way that we're going to do it. What it's going to look like is much closer to the way in which you customize your newsfeed on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, right? And the way you do that is by interacting with a wide variety of content. And so I imagine that we'll end up in that state. And you can just think about the different use cases around whether you want to provide a utility that offers interesting and fun news, or if you want to provide something of value where it's like someone's a scientist and they're trying to like learn about this new theory. And so their whole platform is this social like interface for discovering, new information around some science thing. Or for example, like that's a terrible example, but like there's a whole bunch of use cases. If I'm, trying to find a restaurant nearby, like should I use like this social network that is also like my news, or should I use a different platform entirely? And what's interesting with this is it doesn't matter how many people have the need for a platform like the one you want, there will be infinite amount of content that you can look through. So really treating this less as a social network and more as like a new way to access the information from the internet that is valuable to a user. And the combination of the social network algorithms with the language models to produce the content that then can be tested to then send to users, I think is going to be the next big thing. 100%. That's how I see it.
I'm so curious. It's very obvious from this conversation that like you've thought like a million steps ahead of the news stories that have come out about social AI. And I'm curious how much of social AI's current form was strategic because you knew it was like a viral concept that would go viral. Like everyone hears like, oh, you know, AI only social media, you know, it's like, and it looks like Twitter and, you know, it feels very familiar, but also kind of wacky versus, you know, pitching this kind of like far-fetched vision you're talking about. I'm kind of curious, like what went into the thought around the launch and the current iteration of the product.
You know, it's funny. It's a part of me felt like, okay, maybe this is, you know, like, you know, how should I frame this? And I thought like I should call it something like feedback AI or something like that. And I had the idea of calling it social AI at first, but then I thought, no, it's not really a social network, so I'm not going to call it that. And then I thought, okay, I'll call it feedback AI. I'll call it something else. You know, I had a couple of names. I was like, oh, what about like, you know, AI comments or something? And I wasn't quite sure what to call it. And I remember I was in Miami with my parents and visiting, and I asked my mom, I was like, I'm just so torn. Like the product's almost done. Like I'm going to launch in like a few days. You know, what do I call it? And she was like, look, just go with the first name you had for the app, regardless of how you feel about it. Just if it was the first name you had with it, there's a reason why your instinct just said that. So just go with that. And I thought about it and I was like, all right, I guess social AI. It sounds weird, but what do you think? And I tell my sister, what do you think of social AI? She's like, it's not a social network. I was like, no, but it's got a social interface. And she was like, all right, you know, whatever. And my mom was like, just go with it. If that was the first, you know, that's the one. I was like, okay. So I went with social AI. You know, and I thought about it too strategically in that, like, what's a name that I could give the app where, like, if anyone wanted to, like, make a clone, they would not be able to make a clone without, like, without describing the app by naming mine. Like they would have to name my app to describe theirs. And in the world with no moats, I think names, you know, in some sense need to have that, right? And so social AI just kind of happened, and everyone now talking about social AI is like, okay, well now they have to say social AI every time they talk about whatever they're doing. That was, I think, was quite important. Yeah, and so in terms of
3D chess right there.
I love that. That's
so like it's a conversational topic, and really like the idea around it was less so the exact implementation, but it's more like a format that I think is going to like take off in many different ways. And so maybe this is a little bit of a kick for the industry to kind of see what can be done and not to hold back and not to give up on consumer with AI, but rather see just the potential that it has to, in all the different spaces. So yeah, the word social really just means the interface. And the post I wrote about my tweet that I posted was really just me trying to like think about like, how would I describe this app to like my mom? Like if I had to write her a letter, in the mail and what would that look like? And I just talked to her about what I built and why, and kind of took it that route. I thought like, if I didn't want to make it sound like I was trying to sell a product. If anything, I just wanted to talk about what I built. And during COVID, like I spent a lot of time just sitting there thinking like, man, like it is so hard to share anything. I can't share my thoughts on social media. I can't share my thoughts with my friends. It's hard to connect. It's hard to get a second thought on something whenever I'd get in fights with, my friends or whoever. I want to like think about it, but I didn't want to like say something I didn't mean. So I'd say, where do I go? Can I write it in a diary? Oh, my diary is not going to say anything to me. Like me thinking to myself, it's like, it's not enough. So I thought, okay, well, what's a way for me to think through my thoughts without having to like, blurt out everything in my mind? And that's kind of where the original concept came from. So I thought, okay, I'll stick to that. I'll share that. And, and where this product leads and what it becomes, I think is a matter that people will discover as soon as they try it for the first time. And I think that's been the case. I think once somebody posts something on social AI, obviously the responses aren't, amazing or whatever, but like, I think they immediately see like 10 different use cases for it. And I just think that's so freaking cool.
Yeah. To be honest, I posted yesterday. I posted my first social AI post yesterday, and I posted the same thing that I posted on Twitter on social AI just to see what the comparison of responses would be. And the question that I posed, which actually divided my group chat, someone had sent someone else a 15-minute calendar invite instead of like the default 30. And the person who received the invite like texted our group chat being like, this is offensive, blah, blah, blah. And everyone was debating whether that was offensive or actually respectful. So anyway, I posted both on Twitter in a poll, and I also posted in social AI. And literally the responses I got in social AI were more thoughtful and diverse than the ones that I got on Twitter. So I'm just saying, I think there is something there.
Look,
people are underrated or overrated.
And that's just me building out this model in like 4 weeks. Like, it's not even that, like advanced. I don't know half of the things about machine learning stuff. Like, I just kind of piece it together. So you can imagine like what does that kind of product look like when it's put, in a serious, effort. And that I think has been the most surprising and exciting thing about this is the number of, like companies who do have established teams around building out some of these AI models, kind of reaching out saying, hey, would you love to we'd love to work with you on like just scaling out something like this. And really building it to be of value to people, right? I think that's cool. And fundamentally, I think regardless of all this stuff, it will not replace human connection between people. Like the need for humans to talk to humans will always be there. But it is questionable, to the point you made earlier, how much value we get from posting on something like Reddit and not knowing whether it's a bot or a human that's responding to us. I actually think some of that is a little problematic for people. So to the extent that I think we can offer something of value there, I think it's useful. I don't really see it as replacing human connection. Rather, I think of it as like a new way to talk to the internet, something that wasn't possible before. And it's just becoming more human-like to talk to the internet. Whereas before, I think it was more of a structured approach.
Yeah. How do you think about rewarding users? I mean, the history of, or maybe you don't think about it at all. Like, in Facebook, you have followers and likes, and Snapchat, the Gen Zs love their snap streaks or whatever. And same with Instagram on that kind of like and follower side of things. Like, and thinking about, you mentioned like the no moats world. Is there, because you won't have like traditional network effects to tap into potentially. Like, just curious, how do you think about rewarding users in a way that will make them want to kind of come back to social AI? Or is it more just based on the interactions they have and kind of the feelings they have with social AI itself?
Yeah, that's a good question. In terms of rewarding users, I think the reward comes in the responses. It's like, what reward does Google give its users when they use a product? I think just gives it a good answer, or gives it something useful, right? And so that's the nice thing about a utility, is that like you only really need to focus on giving the user value. But what's nice about this type of interface is that the way that you end up giving people more value also kind of builds a bit of a moat, because in order to give people the most value, they need to like interact with the platform, engage with some of the comments, distill and offer signal around what's more valuable to them and not. And so that like flywheel kind of mixes the algorithm with like the prompting that then morphs all of the different like fingerprinted versions of that AI that respond to you in different ways. And that like cycle just keeps going to build out like a profile, really a data set around who you are as a person that can then, that set of data then is used to modify and like pre-prompt all of the language models that interact with you in a way that you could never possibly like come up with yourself to pre-prompt ChatGPT to give you the answer in that same way. And so really the moat then becomes that data set that then informs those pre-prompted AI models. And so can someone else then build the same thing for a user? Yes. But the value really comes from like being able to do that. It is, I think it's a flimsier house of cards than the social network one because they're not people, but it is one regardless that can be built. And I think what's cool about it is like, it's almost like a 10x competitive space where the products will just move faster and the competition will just be more vast and the products will just be way better. And so like the flywheels just move faster. The number of different use cases and products that can be built are just so many more. It's just, it's exciting in that sense.
Maybe just to wrap up before we go to rapid fire, I would love to hear more about kind of the future of social AI or friendly apps. You kind of alluded to some changes that you're making immediately and also like the very far vision, but I'm kind of curious like what the next like 6 months to a year looks like. Like, are you doubling down on social AI, building new apps, pursuit of this mission? I'd love to hear more.
Well, it's tough because the space is competitive. And, to be honest, the only way forward with a product like this is with a team and a set of resources that really allows it to get to the next level. Like, I'm not going to make any move that I don't think allows for this type of technology to like not hit its full potential. So if I don't believe that like there are enough resources for the product to like succeed on its own, like I'm going to find that team to help grow it. And if I can't find that team to help grow it, then it's a matter of like, okay, well, who wants to work with me on exploring, the social AI space? And what does that look like? So I'm not, it's interesting. I've gotten some like offers from some folks. I've been thinking about how, like, what is the way that we can like maximize impact in consumer social with AI? And like, is social AI kind of like a Kickstarter to all of the products that will be built in the space, or what does social AI look like? And so so right now that's kind of the decisions I've got to make. And I don't know, in terms of what's next, I don't know, I'll probably have something to share in a couple weeks.
Cool. Great.
Love that.
Excited for that. Very cool. Leroy, do you want to wrap us up with rapid fire?
Yeah, absolutely. The purpose of these questions or statements is for you to answer them in kind of one sentence or less.
I'll give it my best.
We'll start with the founder you look up to most.
I guess Steve Jobs. And, like that sounds cliche. One, he's not here right now, kind of a cop-out answer. And then another, like, everyone says him. But yeah, I guess I've been watching his keynote since I was like 10.
Yeah. Well, just because it's cliche doesn't mean it's not the right answer or the real answer for you. The book that most changed your life.
Sapiens.
Popular one. I still haven't read it, so we'll get to that.
It's maybe it's not the most exciting book to read, I'll tell you that, but but it is interesting, but it is not exciting. It does not make me go, whoa,
I mean, I think there's a lot of elements in that book that kind of relate to like the space that you're in, like, how the importance of stories, like monetary policy is kind of dictated by a giant story. I don't know, there's all these examples that you can see how it would touch.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I struggled through it, to be honest. Yeah. I tried. I really wanted to read the book. People had recommended it to me, and it took me way longer than it takes most people to get through books like this because some of the words and just the phrasing was just difficult, but I tried.
What job would you want if you couldn't be a founder?
Maybe like a chief product officer at a company. I actually don't like the idea of being a CEO. I don't want to do it.
I appreciate the honesty, honestly.
Yeah, same. Yeah. What was your first entrepreneurial endeavor? I guess was that kind of.
I guess
fortunate?
first. Oh, actually, so my first one was actually I built like a club with my sister when I was in second grade and she was in first, and I called it the first and second grade club. And I started to like hand out flyers at school, and I printed out these things I designed on like the Microsoft like Paint, and I built out like these slide decks, and I started doing these like secret meetings, and I would have like
oh my gosh,
That's incredible.
I love that. So fun.
Scheming from a young age. It's great. Let's finish with consumer mega trend or hottest take that either you're most excited by or you want the world to know.
Okay, so I guess hot take would be I think pyramid scheme viral things are overrated and do not impress me at all.
Wait, what's an example? Like,
Laps, I think.
I don't even know what that is. That's how disconnected I am.
There are these apps that like they say, oh, in order to use the app, you need to invite 3 people, and then it's like if you invite 3 people, you get. It's like okay, what's the difference between that and like Mary Kay? Like I don't know.
Or like
Herbalife.
It's basically just it's social Herbalife.
Right. And so not that interested in that. That's my hot take. I guess in terms of like what I think is cool that's being done right now. This is no surprise. It's all the social AI stuff that's being experimented on. I think in the next couple of months, we'll see a lot of exciting products in that space, and I just can't wait to try them.
Awesome. Oh, my last question. I impulse bought, which I actually really don't impulse buy many things, but I impulse bought the Meta Ray-Bans yesterday. Is that a good idea or a bad idea?
I think that there's a big future to come with a lot of those devices.
That's a very diplomatic, kind answer. So I probably will be utilizing my return policy, but I'm excited to try.
Steph's just trying to angle to get into first and second grade club. Let's be honest.
True. I'm trying to be cool. Love it.
Michael,
thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
This was awesome.
Thank you guys. This is great.
Amazing.
Thanks everyone for listening. You can find us at somethingnewpod.com. You can follow Steph at StephMui, MUI on Twitter. You can follow myself, Lior, at LMushin on Twitter. Catch us again next time.
Cool. I thought it went well.